My boots hit the marble floor hard, echoing through the courthouse lobby as I chased after Ray Hale, my voice tight with panic. Ray, stop! Damn it, she's not a threat! But he didn't listen, never did, his broad shoulders stiff with that stubborn arrogance as he closed in on her. The woman in the sharp black blazer who just turned to face us, her brown eyes slicing through the chaos like a blade. I felt my stomach twist, a cold sweat prickling under my uniform, because I knew this was about to go sideways. Ray's hand hovered over his radio, his jaw clenched, and her lips parted just enough to let out a cool, "Excuse me?" that stopped him dead. The lobby went quiet, phones silenced, footsteps paused, and I swear I could feel 100 eyes boring into us. Then the clerk's voice cut through, shrill and breathless. "Judge Carter, your courtroom's ready!" And just like that, Ray's smirk melted into something pale and dumbstruck. While my chest tightened with a mix of dread and shame, 10 years on this job, and I'd never felt so small. My name's Derek Lewis. I'm 35, ex-Marine, now a security guard at this sprawling urban courthouse, where the air always smells like coffee and stress. I've got a shaved head, a faded tattoo of my old unit's insignia on my forearm, and a habit of keeping my head down. Served overseas, came back, needed steady work, landed here. It's been a decade of scanning bags, checking IDs, and watching people's lives unravel in front of judges who barely look at me. I'm good at it, the rhythm of it, the morning rush, the attorneys barking into phones, the defendants shuffling in with hunched shoulders. I've learned to spot trouble from a mile away, or at least I thought I had. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from here, keep a few weights in the corner, and call my mom every Sunday. It's a quiet life, one I've built to avoid waves. But today, that quiet's gone, and it's my own damn fault. It started like any other morning. I was at the security checkpoint, running a briefcase through the x-ray machine, when Ray nudged me with his elbow, his voice low and edged with that smugness I've come to hate. "Lewis, check her out." I followed his gaze across the lobby, past the buzzing crowd to her, mid-30s, black, standing near the elevators in a tailored black blazer and heels so polished they caught the fluorescent lights. She held herself straight, confident, but her eyes darted over the directory on the wall like she wasn't sure where to go. I frowned, adjusting my stance. "She's just looking for her courtroom, Ray," he scoffed, his buzzed blonde head shaking. 5 minutes she's been there, man. No check-in, no asking for help, just scoping the place. You telling me that ain't suspicious? I sighed, feeling the familiar weight of his bullshit settling on my shoulders. Ray's always like this, sees a problem where there isn't one, turns nothing into something because he likes the power trip. I should have shut it down right there, but I didn't. "Could be a lawyer," I muttered, half-hearted. "That ain't no lawyer," he shot back, already moving toward her. "Come on, let's find out." I trailed him, my boots dragging a little, keeping my face blank. I've seen Ray pull this routine too many times, picking fights with people who don't deserve it, flexing his badge like it's a crown. Pushing back never works. He just doubles down, and I've learned it's easier to let him burn himself out. But as we got closer, something about her made me uneasy. Not fear, not guilt yet, just a flicker of doubt. She noticed us, her sharp eyes flicking up from the directory, and Ray jumped in, voice too loud, too sharp. "Hey, you lost?" She turned fully, her expression flat, unreadable, like she was sizing him up. "Excuse me?" she said, calm but firm. Ray folded his arms, leaning in a little. "I said you lost? You've been standing here a while, looking around. If you got business in this courthouse, you need to check in at the desk." I watched her, waiting for the usual, nerves, defensiveness, something. But she didn't flinch. She just stared at Ray like he was dirt on her shoe, then tilted her head. "And if I don't..." Ray's eyes narrowed, that slow smirk I know too well creeping onto his face. "Then we're going to have a problem." I felt my gut twist tighter, a dull ache starting behind my ribs. This was Ray's game. He wanted her to push back so he could escalate, prove he's in charge. I should have stepped in, said something, anything, but my tongue stayed heavy, pinned by years of habit. "Sir," she said, her voice cool as steel, "I'm standing in a public building. I don't have to explain myself to you." Ray's jaw ticked, his hand brushing his belt. Listen, lady, my name is not Lady, she cut in, sharp now, and I'd appreciate it if you'd lower your tone. The lobby seemed to shrink, the chatter fading as heads turned, attorneys pausing mid-sentence, a bailiff by the doors glancing over. Ray's smirk faltered, then hardened. Lower my tone, he repeated, stepping closer. I don't know what you think this is, but you don't walk in here giving orders. I moved then, just a half step, my voice low. Ray, ease up. He ignored me, like always. She smiled, a thin, cold thing, and I felt that flicker of doubt bloom into something heavier. That's when Maya Torres popped up on my radar. She's 25, works the front desk, all quick smiles and sharp edges, with a habit of live streaming courthouse gossip on her phone. I caught her out of the corner of my eye, leaning over the counter, whispering into her screen, drama at the checkpoint, y'all. Ray's at it again. Who's this lady? Drop your guesses. I wanted to tell her to cut it, but Ray was too far gone, reaching for his radio now. You're coming with us, he said, voice hard. What am I being detained for, she asked, one eyebrow lifting, calm as ever. Acting suspicious, Ray snapped. Loitering in a secured area, no ID, refusing to state your business. My stomach dropped. I've heard this script before, watched it end badly too many times. I opened my mouth, but before I could get a word out, a clerk burst through the crowd, her glasses slipping down her nose. Judge Carter, your courtroom's ready. Sorry for the delay, ma'am. The air sucked out of the room. Ray froze, his hand still on his radio, his face draining to a sickly white. I felt my throat close up, heat rushing to my cheeks. Judge Carter. She straightened her blazer, gave me a long, steady look. Thank you, she murmured, dry as hell, then walked off, her heels clicking like gunfire on the marble. Nobody moved for a second. Ray's mouth hung open, his brain lagging behind his bravado. She's a judge, he croaked, barely audible. I didn't answer, couldn't. My pulse hammered in my ears, my uniform suddenly too tight. Maya's voice broke through, gleeful. Holy crap, that's Judge Aisha Carter, the tech scandal lady. Ray's toast, y'all. I glanced over. Her phone was still rolling, comments flooding her screen. The lobby buzzed back to life, whispers rippling through the crowd, phones slipping out to snap pics. I stood there, rooted, feeling the weight of every stare like a physical shove. Judge Carter didn't look back. Didn't need to. Her silence hit harder than any lecture. Ray ran a hand over his head, forcing a laugh. Damn, didn't see that coming. I shot him a look, sharp and hot, but he wasn't paying attention, just shaking it off like it was nothing. Let's get back to work, he muttered, tugging his belt straight. Forget it happened. But I couldn't. The rest of the morning dragged, each minute heavier than the last. I went through the motions, scanning bags, nodding at clerks, but my mind kept replaying it. Her eyes on me, Ray's smug voice, my own damn silence. I kept glancing at the elevators she'd disappeared into, half expecting her to come back, half dreading it. What if she reported us? I've dodged complaints before. Drunk guy swinging at me, attorney pissed about a late bag check. But this was different. This was a judge, and not just any judge. Aisha Carter's name rang bells. I'd heard it in passing, tied to some big case last year about hacked voting machines or something. She wasn't just power. She was the kind of power that noticed you. By lunch, I couldn't breathe right. I stepped outside to the courtyard, the March air cool against my flushed skin, and lit a cigarette I'd been saving for a bad day. I'd barely exhaled when her voice hit me from behind. You got a minute, Lewis? I turned, and there she was, Judge Carter, arms crossed, standing by a stone bench. Her dark hair caught the breeze, but her stance was solid, unyielding. My heart kicked up, smoke burning my throat as I stubbed the cigarette out fast. Yes, ma'am, I said, straightening up. She nodded, then walked toward a quieter corner, expecting me to follow. I did, my boots loud against the pavement, my mind racing. She stopped, studied me for a long beat, then spoke. How long you been here? 10 years, I said, voice steady despite the churn in my gut. 10 years, she echoed, something sharp in her tone. So you know how this place works. I nodded, unsure where this was going. You knew he was wrong, she said. Not a question, a fact. I swallowed, feeling those words sink in deep. Yes, I admitted, low and rough. She shook her head, just a little. Then why didn't you stop him? It hit me like a punch, harder because it was quiet, because she wasn't yelling, just asking. I licked my lips, scrambling for an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. It's complicated. Ray doesn't listen, never has. If I push, it's me who gets the write-up, or worse. Her eyebrow lifted, but she didn't interrupt, just waited. I've seen it, I went on, voice tightening. Guys like me step out of line, and it's not just a slap on the wrist, it's the whole system coming down. Well, she nodded again like she'd heard it before. Lived it, maybe. You ever think about why that is, she asked. I tensed, my jaw locking. Of course I had. Because I'm black, because Ray's white, because this uniform doesn't shield me the way it does him. But saying it out loud felt like handing her a loaded gun. Yeah, I said finally, short and clipped. She crossed her arms tighter. I see men like you all the time, Lewis. Good men. Men who don't rock the boat because they know it's not built for them. I get it. But when you saw what he was doing, did it sit right with you? I couldn't answer, not with words. My silence was enough. She saw it, sighed, and checked her watch. I've got a hearing in 10, but listen, you get to choose what kind of man you are here. Part of the system or something more. Think about that. She turned to go, then paused, throwing me a small, knowing smile. Would have reported him? I blurted, surprising myself. Didn't need to, she said and walked off. I stood there, breath shallow, until I heard the courthouse doors swing open behind me. Two officers stepped out, one a supervisor, clipboard in hand, escorting Ray. His face was tight, lips pressed thin, no smirk left. The supervisor nodded at me, curt, and I knew someone had reported him. Not her, but someone. Maybe Maya, maybe a clerk who'd finally had enough. I watched them lead him out the side exit, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. Relief, maybe, or a warning. The afternoon blurred by. I kept my head down, but the whispers followed me. Clerks glancing over, attorneys muttering behind briefs. I felt raw, exposed, like every move I made was under a spotlight. Maya caught me in the hall later, her eyes bright with adrenaline. You see it? My live stream went viral. Ray's done, Derek. Suspended, maybe fired. She grinned, proud, but it grated on me. You did that for justice or for likes? I asked, sharper than I meant. She laughed, unbothered. What's the difference? People saw the truth. I didn't argue, couldn't really. She was right. The video was everywhere now. Hashtags popping off, news vans probably circling outside. Ray's past was spilling out too. Old complaints, yelling matches caught on grainy footage. He'd always slipped through, but not this time. I should have gone home after my shift, crashed on my couch with a beer and let it fade. Instead, I found myself outside Judge Carter's chambers. The door was cracked. I knocked anyway. Come in, she called, voice smooth. I stepped inside, small office, no frills, just a desk and a window with a view of the city turning gold in the late light. She looked up from a file, steady as ever. Officer Lewis, she said, sitting back. What can I do for you? I shut the door, hesitating. I wanted to talk. Her lips quirked. That's a first. I huffed a dry laugh, running a hand over my face. Yeah, I guess it is. She nodded, waiting. He's gone, I said. Ray, suspended. Maybe more. I know, she replied, simple. I met her eyes. Did you report him? No, she said, tilting her head. Didn't have to. I frowned. Then who? Does it matter? She cut in, and I stopped, grasping at nothing. It's just, guys like him don't usually go down, I said, voice low. White guys like him, she corrected, matter of fact. I stiffened, but she didn't flinch, just leaned forward. You want to know why this time was different? I nodded, throat tight, because enough people saw. Enough people were tired, and maybe because men like you are starting to ask questions. Her words hung there, heavy. I shifted, hands on my hips. I've been asking questions a long time, I said, defensive now. Have you? She shot back, eyebrow up. I opened my mouth, then shut it. Sure, I'd thought it. The unfairness, the way I've had to move careful, stay quiet while Ray blundered through untouched. But doing something? That was another story. She sighed, softening a little. You think you're the only one playing the game? I've been mistaken for the court reporter in my own courtroom more times than I can count. Smiled through it, let it slide because it was easier. But you do that too long, you become the problem. I looked down, her words cutting deeper than I wanted. You're not a bad man, Lewis, she added quieter. I laughed, bitter. Doesn't feel like it today. She nodded toward the chair across her desk. Sit. I did, reluctant, the wood creaking under me. She leaned in. What happens next? What do you mean? I asked, frowning. With you, she said. You watched it happen today. Let it happen. I'm not here to drag you. You know what you did. But what are you going to do about it? I swallowed hard, her gaze pinning me like a spotlight. I could keep coasting, keep silent, pretend it's just a job, or what? She saw the flicker in my eyes, nodded. I'm not saying quit, not saying make yourself a target. But next time you see this, what'll you do? I exhaled slow, no answer ready, but wanting one. I'll figure it out, I said, finally standing. She smiled, small but real. Good. I turned to go, then stopped at her voice. Lewis, I looked back. I expect to see you in my courtroom soon. Why? I asked, puzzled. Her smile widened. Because next time you won't be silent. I left her office, mind spinning, and headed home through the darkening streets. My phone buzzed. A text from James Coleman, an old Marine buddy turned lawyer. Heard about today. You once said you'd study law. Offers are still open. I stared at it, the weight of the day settling in my bones. Out there, Ray was gone. Maya's video still trending, Carter's words echoing. I didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time in 10 years, I knew I couldn't keep looking away. Next morning, I skipped the cigarette, grabbed a coffee, and walked into the public law library instead. The book in my hand, Criminal Procedure, felt heavy, solid. I opened it and something in me shifted, like a door cracking ajar after being locked too long. Here's the continuation of the story, weaving in a deeper message about accountability and courage, while adding a call to action for the audience to share their thoughts, subscribe, and spread the word about your channel. I'll keep it in the first-person voice of Derek Lewis, staying true to the tone and style, with vivid emotions and situations, pushing toward that 30,000 character goal. Let's dive back in. The library smelled like old paper and dust, a quiet hum of fluorescent lights overhead as I flipped through the pages of that criminal procedure book. My hands trembled just a little, not from fear, but from something else, something waking up inside me after years of sleep. The words blurred for a second, my mind drifting back to yesterday. Ray's smug face crumpling, Judge Carter's steady gaze cutting through me, Maya's gleeful voice shouting justice into her phone. I'd spent a decade in that courthouse, eyes sharp for threats, but blind to the rot right in front of me. I'd told myself it was survival. Keep quiet, clock in, clock out, don't make waves. But sitting here, the weight of that book in my hands, I felt the truth settle like lead in my gut. Silence isn't survival. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. I didn't sleep much that night. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in as I paced between the kitchen and the worn-out couch. The TV flickered in the corner, muted, some news anchor mouthing about the latest courthouse scandal. Ray's face splashed across the screen, grainy stills from Maya's live stream looping behind her. My phone buzzed again, James's text glowing in the dark. You once said you'd study law, offers still open. I'd laughed it off back then, told him I didn't have the time, the money, the stomach for it. Single mom raising me, bills piling up after I got out of the Marines. Security work was safe, steady, but safe hadn't stopped me from standing there yesterday, letting Ray dig us both a hole. I tossed the phone on the counter, grabbed a beer, then put it back unopened. No more numbing this out. I needed to think. Next morning, I was back at the courthouse, boots polished, uniform crisp, but my head was somewhere else. The lobby buzzed same as always. Phones ringing, heels clicking, attorneys barking. But it felt different, like I was seeing it for the first time. Maya waved at me from the desk, her grin wide and triumphant. Derek, you see the views? 3 million and climbing. Ray's toast. I heard they're pulling his whole phone now, years of complaints. Her energy hit me like a slap, bright and loud, and I couldn't tell if I admired it or resented it. You proud of that? I asked, voice low, not quite accusing, but close. She blinked, then laughed, flipping her dark ponytail. Hell yeah, I am. People deserve to know who's screwing up their justice system, don't you think? I didn't answer right away, just nodded curtly and moved to my post. She wasn't wrong, Ray had it coming, but something about her glee stuck in my throat, like she'd turned my mess into her victory lap. The day dragged, my eyes scanning bags but my mind replaying Carter's words. You get to choose what kind of man you are here. I kept seeing her face, calm and unflinching, the way she'd looked at me, not with pity, not with anger, but with expectation. It gnawed at me, that look, like she'd seen something I hadn't yet. Around noon, James Coleman rolled through the checkpoint, his gray suit wrinkled from a morning in court, his broad grin cutting through my haze. Derek, my man, heard you're famous now, caught the tail end of that live stream. Rough day, huh? I smirked, sliding his briefcase back to him. You could say that. He leaned in, voice dropping. You talked to Carter after? I nodded, slow. Yeah, she asked me some things. His eyebrows shot up. Aisha Carter doesn't just ask things. She's testing you, brother. Always has. I frowned, leaning against the x-ray machine. Testing me for what? James chuckled, clapping my shoulder. To see if you've got spine. She's young for a judge, but she's sharp. Cut her teeth on cases that'd make most lawyers quit. Doesn't suffer fools. Doesn't let good men coast either. You gonna step up? I shifted, uneasy, the memory of her voice, low, steady, piercing, flooding back. Step up how? I asked. You tell me, he said, eyes glinting. But I meant what I texted. Law school, Derek. You'd kill it. Think about it. He grabbed his bag and headed off, leaving me standing there, pulse ticking a little faster. Law school. Me. The idea was insane. Years of school, debt, starting over at 35, but it stuck, burrowing into my skull like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Later, I caught a break and slipped outside, needing air. The courtyard was quiet, just a few pigeons pecking at crumbs, the March wind tugging at my jacket. I lit another cigarette, watching the smoke curl up into the gray sky when I heard her again. Still smoking those, Lewis? I turned sharp, and there she was, Judge Carter, leaning against the same stone bench as yesterday, a paper coffee cup in her hand. My stomach flipped, but I managed to nod. Bad habit, ma'am. She smirked, just a little, and walked over, her heels clicking soft now, not sharp like in the lobby. You didn't come back to my office just to apologize, she said, sipping her coffee, eyes locked on mine. What's on your mind? I stubbed the cigarette out, buying time, my throat tight. I don't know, I admitted, rougher than I meant. Yesterday, I should have stopped him. I didn't. And now Ray's gone, and I'm still here, feeling like I dodged something I shouldn't have. She tilted her head, studying me, and I felt that same weight again, like she was peeling back layers I'd spent years piling on. You didn't dodge anything, she said. You're right where you're supposed to be, facing it. Question is, what now? I clenched my jaw, frustration bubbling up. I don't know what now. I've been here 10 years, keeping my head down, staying out of trouble. It's worked. Till it didn't. She nodded slow, like she'd expected that. Worked for who? You or the system that's fine with men like hail running loose till someone else cleans it up? Her words stung, sharp and true, and I looked away, hands shoving into my pockets. I'm not saying it's your fault, she went on softer now. But you've got a choice, Lewis. Keep playing it safe, or start asking why safe's never been enough. I didn't have an answer, not one I could say out loud. My chest felt tight, a mix of anger and shame and something else, something restless. She finished her coffee, crumpled the cup, and tossed it into a nearby bin with a flick of her wrist. I've got a case tomorrow, she said, casual but pointed. Domestic dispute, guy harassing his ex. Cops let him slide 3 times before she got a restraining order. You should sit in. I blinked, caught off guard. Why? Because you'll see it, she said, turning to go. What men like Hale do when no one stops them, and what happens when someone does. She walked off, leaving me there, the wind cold against my neck, her invitation hanging in the air like a dare. That night, I didn't pace. I sat at my kitchen table, the law book from the library open in front of me, James's text glowing on my phone. I thought about Mom, how she'd worked double shifts at the diner to keep me fed, how she'd told me once, "Don't let this world make you small, Derek." I thought about Ray, his smug laugh, his hand on that radio. I thought about Carter, standing in her own courtroom, refusing to shrink. And I thought about me, 10 years of silence, 10 years of letting the boat rock without me. It didn't sit right anymore. It never had. Next morning, I put on my uniform, but it felt different. Lighter, maybe, or heavier in a way I could carry. I walked into Carter's courtroom, not as a guard, but as a man taking a seat in the back row. The case unfolded slow, ugly. A guy in a cheap jacket snarling at his ex-wife across the room, her voice shaking as she recounted the threats, the late-night calls, the cops who'd shrugged it off. Carter listened, her face stone, then leaned forward, voice like a blade. 3 times, Mr. Harris. 3 times you got a pass, not today. She banged the gavel, sentencing him. 6 months, no bail, and I felt something shift in me, hard and real. It wasn't just her ruling. It was her refusal to let it slide, her choice to act. I wanted that, not the robe, not the bench, just the spine. After, I caught her in the hall, her arms full of files. "Lewis," she said, glancing up, not surprised. "You came." "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "I saw it." She nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. "Good. Keep seeing." I took a breath, then let it out. "I'm thinking about law school." Her smile was small, sharp. "About time." She walked off, and I stood there, the noise of the courthouse fading around me, my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Here's the thing. None of this was easy. Ray's gone, yeah, and maybe that's justice, but it didn't wipe the slate clean. I let him run his mouth, let him cross lines, because I told myself it wasn't my fight. But it was. It always is. Every time someone like him gets away with it, every time I look away, it's on me too. Carter showed me that, not with a lecture, but with a mirror. And now I've got a choice. Stay the guard who clocks out or become the man who steps in. I'm choosing the second, one shaky step at a time, starting with that damn law book, starting with saying no next time. Because if I don't, who will? So what about you? You've heard my story, where I screwed up, where I'm trying to fix it. What do you think? Ever had a moment where you stayed quiet when you shouldn't have? Or maybe when you spoke up and it changed everything? Drop it in the comments. Let me know. This channel's about real stories, raw moments, stuff that hits you and sticks. If it hits you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. We're just getting started here, peeling back the layers of what goes down in places like this courthouse. Stick around. I've got more coming, and I'm not staying silent anymore.